Heidi go? Where did? Oh. Well, thank you, Heidi, wherever you are. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Iowa Yang Gang. What an amazing crowd here tonight. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here tonight. When Andrew first told me that he was running for president, I assumed it was just a phase. But now, as I've been traveling with him across this country, I am so glad that it was not just a phase. In fact, in my heart, I believe it was a calling. Andrew is running as a parent and as a patriot on values that are so dear to us as a family and so urgently important for our country now. And it's because Americans know that things aren't all right. Too many people are being left behind. Too many American families are struggling to make ends meet. Too many women are stuck in abusive situations. We have children who are hungry and homeless in the United States of America, where we have so much wealth. None of us should be okay with this. Yet Andrew is the only candidate addressing poverty in any meaningful way. We have the ability to eradicate poverty. Yes. Applaud for eradicating poverty. And I believe we have a moral obligation as a country to do so. Of course, $1,000 a month doesn't solve all our problems. We have a lot of big systemic changes that we need to work on as a country. And if you look into any one of Andrew's 100 plus policy proposals, then you know that he fully intends to do this work. But the freedom dividend, $1,000 a month in our hands, is a critical first step in the right direction. It means that millions of Americans will be able to lift their heads up and look forward and plan and save for a rainy day and hope for a brighter future. That's why I so embrace this campaign and the work that Andrew is doing, putting humanity first and creating a new path forward so that Americans can finally see and believe that they are not invisible. And this will demonstrate that their country cares about them, that their country values them and is willing to invest in them, and is willing to step up to ensure them and their children and families a brighter future. That is the future that Andrew Yang is fighting for. So I hope you will consider canvassing and spreading this message of humanity first. Please sign up today with any of the organizers. Anyone with a clipboard, any organizers here today, please raise your hand. Please sign up with them. Please find them after this rally and sign up to canvass. Thank you so, so much. We can't do this without you. So now I'd like to introduce the next President of the United States, my husband, Andrew Yang.
Hello, Iowa City! It is so great to be back. It's so great to be back here with you all. This is my 23rd time in Iowa, first with a bus, the bus that the people built. Every time I come to Iowa, I get fired up because the future of the country lies in your hands. I know right now you're living your lives, you're going to school. Every once in a while a presidential candidate comes through. You can't escape the ads, I apologize. I'm not one of the worst offenders, you know that. I'm like right there in the middle, in the acceptable range. The reason why we all come to you, the reason I get fired up every time is that you have outsized power in our country, in our political machine. Most Americans look up and they see the pipes of government clogged with millions and millions of dollars of lobbyist cash, and they despair that there is nothing they can do about it. And Americans are very smart. Generally speaking, there is nothing they can do about it. But there is something you all can do about it. I did the math. Do you know how many Iowans, do you know how many Californians each Iowan is worth? 1,000 Californians each. That's right. You look around this junior high gymnasium tonight, I don't see 300 Iowans, I see 300,000 Californians. That's like 7 football stadiums full of Californians right here. That's the power in this room. This is the power to take our country and turn it in a new direction just like that. That's why it's always invigorating to be here. The question is, what are you going to do with this power? What vision will you take to the rest of the country in 2020? You all know I'm not a politician. I don't think you mind that, for the most part. I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver, and I'm running for president because of the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. Why is Donald Trump our president today? How did he win Iowa by 8 points? And this is a really purple state. This is sort of a blue town, too, so you probably reacted quite negatively when Donald Trump won, I'm imagining. If you turned on cable news, why would you think that Donald Trump's our president today? Russia, FBI, racism, Hillary Clinton, emails, Facebook, right, all mashed together into some strange cocktail. I think many of you know different. The reason why Donald Trump's our president today is that we blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs. And where were those jobs? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. And I've been to the towns here in Iowa that have never recovered from the closing of their plant. That's when blue goes to red. That's how a purple state goes to Trump by 8 points. And the forces that close those manufacturing plants throughout the Midwest are now reaching your main streets. How many of you have seen stores closing around where you live here in this part of Iowa? And why are those stores closing? Amazon. One-word answer. $20 billion out every single year. They're sucking it up. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? That is your math, Iowa. $20 billion out. Zero back. 30% of your stores and malls closed for good. Most common job in your communities, retail clerk. 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $10 an hour. What does she do when her store closes? When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the bot or the software, I'm sure you do the exact same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say human, 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 until you get someone on the line, right? How many of you all do that? All of us. That software is miserable. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, a little bit seductive. What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now making $14 an hour? How many of you have seen a self-serve kiosk in a fast food restaurant, like a McDonald's? They will be in every location in the United States in 2 years, and they're going to move to the back of the house. The rubber really hits the road when the self-driving trucks come to your highways, come to our highways. They're in bed, yeah, they just did a cross-country route from California to Pennsylvania. They delivered 20 tons of butter. I have no idea why it was 20 tons of butter. How many of you have been to Iowa 80 in Davenport? Yeah, they've got a mean buffet. It's a good value. You walk through the store and then you're like, ooh, cornucopia. Iowa 80 talks proudly about how 5,000 people stop there every day. How many people will stop there when there are robot trucks that don't need a meal, taking our cargo back and forth? These are the reasons why Donald Trump's our president today. We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in our country's history, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. When is the last time a politician said the words fourth industrial revolution to you all? Just now, that's right. And I'm barely a politician. These are the problems that got Donald Trump elected that are picking up steam. And my first move was not to run for president of the United States because I'm not insane, and I can prove it to you. You just met my wife. Where'd Evelyn go? There it is. First thing I did is I went to our leaders in Washington, D.C., and I said, hey, Donald Trump's our president because tens of millions of Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star. Our economy is leaving more and more people behind. What are we going to do to help people manage this transition? It's certainly not immigrants that are causing these problems. It's technology and automation. And what do you think the folks in D.C. said to me when I asked, what are we going to do? Yeah, the big three responses I got from the folks in D.C. were these. Number one, we cannot talk about that, Andrew. Number two, we should study that further, Andrew. Number three, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. That one, how many of you have heard a politician say something like that at some point on TV, right? And you heard that and you were like, yeah, pretty reasonable. But I said to them, hey, I looked at the studies. Do you all want to guess how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers that lost their jobs in the Midwest? The Yang Gang know it's 0 to 15%. They're a total dud. And when I said that to the folks in D.C., you know what they said next? I guess we'll get better at it. And one person said something that led me here to you all tonight. He said, Andrew, no one here in D.C. is going to do anything about this. You are in the wrong town. Because fundamentally, this is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we will do anything about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. I'm so glad I had someone with me because you would think I was making that up, right? You'd think it's like, do people really talk like movie supervillains in real life? Turns out DC lobbyist and movie supervillain sort of in the same. Yeah, there's like an overlapping set between those two. But I heard this and I said, challenge accepted. I will be back with the wave. And that was 2 years ago, Iowa. That was 2 years ago. And you're looking at the wave. This is the wave that's going to rewrite the rules of our 21st century economy to work for us, to work for our people. This is the wave that will enable us to look our kids in the eyes and tell them that they are going to be all right. I started this campaign 2 years ago. No one had ever heard of me. You had never heard of me. And I stand before you tonight, number 5 in national polls, to be the President of the United States. I stand before you tonight, one of the 7 candidates to make the debate stage next week, and the lone candidate of color. I stand before you tonight having raised $10 million in increments of only $30 each last quarter. My fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's, but there are a lot of them. This is a very cheap and wholesome gang to join. Really, the initiation's like essentially zero, like what it did. Yes, this is the wholesome gang of human beings that are going to show our fellow citizens that we can provide a new way forward for our people. And the vision that you all will take to the rest of the country on February 3rd, I know the first time you heard it, it sounded like it was too good to be true. That there was someone running for president who said everyone should get $1,000 a month. And I know, well, you're like, ha, that's a gimmick. I was called the Asian Oprah by one late night host. But this is not my idea, and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of our country. He called it the citizen's dividend. Martin Luther King, championed in the 60s, called it the guaranteed minimum income, and it is what he was fighting for all Americans when he was assassinated in 1968. I had the privilege of sitting down with Martin Luther King's son in Atlanta after the last debate, and he said to me that this is what his dad was fighting for when he was killed. 1,000 economists endorsed this in the 60s. It passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that, Iowa? Alaska. And how do they pay for it? Oil. And what is the oil of the 21st century? Technology, AI, self-driving cars and trucks, big data. A study just came out that said that our data is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you have access to a Netflix password? There's a documentary called The Great Hack, and that study's in there. Raise your hand if you got your data check in the mail last month. Where did the data checks go if our data is now worth more than oil? They went to Amazon, Facebook, Google, and these trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying either zero or near zero in taxes. Do you see the game, Iowa? You know what real power is? Real power is when you can keep people from talking about what's going on. That's the highest level of power. Just keep it off the agenda. How many stories have you seen about the fact that you have trillion-dollar tech companies paying zero in taxes? Believe it or not, it is your power and your power alone to rewrite the rules so that Amazon's paying its fair share, that Facebook's paying its fair share, that Google's paying its fair share. And after we get our fair share from the biggest winners of the 21st century economy, the next step is to put that money into your hands in the form of the dividend. And after you get $1,000 a month starting in 2021, how are you going to spend the money in real life? So I heard healthcare, shopping, schools, rent. How many of you all are students? I bet some of you. Yeah, so we know where the money's going to go. It's going to go to your tuition. It's going to go to your textbooks. And the occasional night out. It's cool. Not every night out is a junior high gymnasium. How much of the money would stay right here in Iowa? Most all of it, not all of it. You'd get your own Netflix password. But most of it would stay right here in your communities, going to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and tuition bills, and Little League signups. This is the trickle-up economy, Iowa, from our people, our families, and our communities up. And this is the vision that you and you alone can make real on February 3rd. I want you to be intoxicated with your own power. This really is the power that you have. You should walk out of here just feeling like you're 7 feet tall. Being like, look at me, I'm worth 1,000 Californians. And as soon as you walk past another Iowan, you can say, you too are worth 1,000 Californians. And let me tell you what you should do with that power. We have to rewrite the rules so that the work of moms around the country, like my wife Evelyn, actually has as much value as a hedge fund manager or a management consultant or an investment banker. Right now, we are following our economic indicators off a cliff. Record high levels of corporate profits. You know what else are at record highs in the United States of America right now? Stress, financial insecurity, student loan debt for sure, anxiety, depression, mental illness, even suicides and drug overdoses, all at record highs in this country. It has gotten so bad that America's life expectancy has declined for 3 years in a row. You know the last time that happened in America? The Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions around the world. That is the last time this happened, Iowa. It is unusual, shocking even, for life expectancy to decline even once in a developed country. It ordinarily just goes in one direction. You're getting stronger, you're getting healthier, taking better care of your people. For it to decline once and then again is almost unprecedented. Who knows what it's going to do in year 4? Yet we're cheerleading record high corporate profits and our people are dying. We had a similar situation 10 years ago, a situation that led me to quit my job and start a nonprofit. And I give so much credit to Evelyn because she could legitimately be like, baby, when I met you, you were a pretty normal guy. You weren't like quitting your jobs and starting nonprofits and running for president or any of this jazz. And it's totally true. She definitely would have run the other direction if she'd. 10 years ago, we had a similar choice. The choice was this. Are we going to bail out our banks, or are we going to keep more Americans in our homes? And what did we choose that time? The banks. Do you remember voting for the $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street? No. I sure as heck don't. They called it quantitative easing and hoped we wouldn't notice. I found this so shocking, I quit my job and spent 7 years trying to make things better. Washington, D.C. today is the richest metro area in our country. What do they produce? They produce bad decisions. They produce lack of accountability. They produce corruption at this point. That's how you have a capital that's the richest in the country. They had a choice between the banks and the people. They chose the banks. I say this time, we're going to get in there and we're going to choose our people. What do you think, Iowa? And I talked to Evelyn about this when she looked at universal basic income, and she said, how was this so mainstream in the 60s and 70s, and now it takes the far-out futurist Asian guy no one's ever heard of to mainstream it. And she asked, how did this happen? What happened in the intervening 50 years? And what happened in those 50 years is that we got collectively brainwashed into thinking that economic value and human value are the same things. That we're all meant to be inputs into this giant capital efficiency machine, and as soon as we lose value, then it's on us. If your town no longer has value, on you. And this is turning against us in unprecedented ways. It's turning us against each other. It's stressing us out. It's making it so that we are contorting ourselves more and more. And as the parents of a special needs child, I know very, very well that economic value and human value are not the same things. Yes. Now, you hear this, and some of you are like, well, how do we change this, Andrew? And this is the glory of it. As your president, it will be very straightforward for me to go to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and say, hey, GDP, 100 years old, really out of date, kind of useless, has no relationship with how our people are doing. If GDP is setting record highs and people are dying earlier, which do you listen to? You listen to the people. So as your president, I will take GDP and I will modernize it to include things that would actually tell us how we are doing. How about our mental health and freedom from substance abuse? How about clean air and clean water? How about average student loan indebtedness and affordability? How about the proportion of Americans who can afford to retire with dignity and not work until the day they die? How about how many Americans can actually afford life-saving drugs instead of having to choose between insulin and heating oil? These are the measurements that will tell us how we're doing, and as your president, I will transform the definition of progress in our economy to things that matter to us. And then I will present the real numbers to you all at the State of the Union every year. I will be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck in the State of the Union. If you like that visual, you probably should join the Yang Gang. Again, it's always a joy to be here, because if I was talking about these changes in any other part of the country, it would be too good to be true. But here in Iowa, the future is what you make it. The future is what you will it to be. This is, again, one of the only places where democracy still works. And you here in Iowa know better than most anyone else the changes that have wreaked havoc on your communities. It started on your farms, then it went to your factories, now it's on your main streets. You all have to stop it before it hits your highways. This is your obligation, your power, your responsibility. Donald Trump became our president in 2016 because he got some of the problems right. He said he was going to make America great again. And what did Hillary Clinton say in response? America is already great. You remember that, Iowa City? It's been 3 long years, hasn't it? That was not the right answer. We have to acknowledge the depth and severity and reality of the problems, but then we need real solutions that would actually improve our way of life. What were Donald Trump's solutions? He said, we're going to build a wall, we're going to turn the clock back, we're going to bring the old jobs back. And you know, Iowa City, we have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society as quickly as possible for the real challenges of the 21st century. We have to evolve in the way we think about ourselves and our work and our value as people. And I am the ideal candidate for that job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. What does math stand for, Iowa City? That's right, make America think harder. That's your job. That's where you are going to lead us. You are going to let the rest of the country know it's not left, it's not right, it's forward. And that is where you're going to lead us in 2020. Thank you, Iowa City. Let's make history together. Let's fight for our children. And let's win this whole thing. Thank you so much. Let's give it up again for the future First Lady, my wife, Evelyn Yang. Evelyn. I certainly married up. It's very, very clear. So I think we're going to take some questions from some of the Iowans who joined us on this tour. Is that right, Heidi?
All right. Our first question is going to be from Army veteran Greg Honig.
Well, the first question on behalf of my family and also on behalf of the Yang Gang is actually for Evelyn. As the future First Lady, what causes would you look to champion?
Okay, so there are a number of causes I would champion, but the first one that is so close to our family, and you heard Andrew talk about it tonight, is advocating for families with special needs children. I think we are possibly the first family running for president to publicly embrace the fact that we are a special needs family. And there are so many millions of special needs families out there. We know what it's like to get a diagnosis of autism and having to plan ahead, plan that road ahead. And it's not easy. And we're lucky because we have the resources to give our son what he needs to continue to make progress. But unfortunately, there are families all across this country, many right here in Iowa, that have access to practically nothing, and that's just unimaginable and wrong. So as First Lady, I would make it one of my priorities to advocate for them, to make sure that their children have access to the resources and options to make sure that they can thrive and have every shot at success.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Allison. I met you last night. It's nice to see you again. So in rural Iowa, women of childbearing age don't have access to contraception, whether it be free or otherwise. These women reside in a women's healthcare and contraception deserts where there is no OBGYN or women's healthcare provider for hundreds of miles. I'm interested in knowing how you would help to make contraception, but especially long-acting reversible contraception, more accessible or even better free for every woman of the United States, regardless of insurance coverage or reimbursements.
Thank you for your leadership and activism on this. Women's reproductive rights are fundamental human rights, and we have to fight for them at every stage. My initial response to this was, as a man, I should just leave the room and let women decide for themselves what they're going to do. I have a feeling.
We don't get pregnant on our own, though.
No. But then a woman very wisely said, hey, I appreciate the spirit of that, but you have to actually champion access to women's reproductive rights at every level. And I said, oh, you're right. Once again, like a woman turned me in the right direction. So we need to make sure that women have access to contraceptives at every stage. Certainly having some additional economic resources in people's hands will help that a great deal, because we know right now a lot of this is about economic freedom. But then we have to invest in Planned Parenthood and clinics to make sure that these services are accessible. I can't believe that there are certain states in this country that are actually rolling back those rights. I will protect those rights at the federal level. I will codify Roe v. Wade. And I will appoint Supreme Court justices who will agree with the truth that women's reproductive rights are human rights. And I will make sure that we have access to women's reproductive services in every community that we can reach. One of the things I've said is that if men became pregnant instead of women, this would be a very, very different conversation. You know what I mean? Like you kind of imagine what access to contraception would look like then. That's actually a vision I would endorse.
Thank you so much.
My name's Alex Iannone, and my question is for Andrew tonight. And my question comes actually from my husband, who knows you as the UBI candidate. So my question is, with a large field of Democratic candidates, what other than UBI sets you apart from the crowd?
Is your husband not here?
No.
That's fine. That's all good. I think what sets me apart from the other candidates is that I see the true nature of the problems that are making us miserable. The fact that our health care and housing and education costs keep on climbing while our wages stay the same. The fact that technology is transforming not just our work opportunities, but also impacting our mental health, making our kids more anxious and depressed. And the tough truth is that it's very difficult to address the problems that technology is causing if you don't understand technology. And there are a number of people in the field that, through no fault of their own, don't truly understand the impact of technology in the 21st century economy and on our families and on the way our brains are even wired. I think one of the paramount threats to our national security is China leapfrogging us in artificial intelligence, because I've sat with the foremost technologists in our country, and they are deeply concerned that we're not going to be able to keep up because this is an aside. Did you know that more Chinese watched artificial intelligence beat the best human player in a game of Go than watched the Super Bowl in the United States that year? So that's how focused they are on this technology that represents the frontier. And I am determined to make sure that America actually solves the real problems that are facing us and stays globally competitive in a way that I don't believe the other candidates can.
Hi, my name is Callie, and I'm actually one of those families that has a special needs child. And I would like to know, Evelyn, what you would recommend to the schools to help them better help our children.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you for that question. Education is so important for all our children, not just our kids with special needs. And what I would want to do is move education to the 21st century, because right now I feel like so much of education is this cookie cutter, one size fits all model that doesn't serve the needs of most of our children, not just the ones with special needs. There are all sorts of learning profiles and learning differences, and whether you have a diagnosis or not, our children are being left behind by this archaic model. And what we need to do is empower our teachers and educators to have the tools to have abilities to be more flexible in the classroom. So being able to personalize learning and teach to the individual, possibly scaling down class sizes when they need to, almost like a modular kind of, that would be my vision for education, is just, and leveraging technology when we can. There's so much that we can do to reach individual children and not think of them as like, this is a one-size-fits-all solution. And the other thing I would do is integrate social emotional learning at every level. Because it's so critical that they learn the stuff of life instead of being so focused on standardized tests. Yeah.
Thank you.
Our little boys definitely need some of those lessons.
Hi, I'm Sabrina, and I wanted to ask Andrew how he would attack the climate crisis through the eyes of a parent.
Hey, Sabrina, how are you? How many of you think climate change is an existential threat to our way of life? I agree. We have to make progress as quickly as possible. If you saw a few debates ago, you remember me staking out the new third position in American politics on climate change? You remember this? Position number 1, we have to fight climate change. Position number 2, climate change is a hoax. And then Andrew Yang's position number 3, it's worse than you think. We are 20 years behind on fighting climate change, and you all have experienced it with the floods that ravaged many communities here in Iowa. In California, it's the forest fires. In New Hampshire, it's the shrimping business going from millions of dollars to zero. Climate change is already here. The last 4 years have been the 4 warmest years in recorded history. So the question is, how do we make progress so that we actually can look at Christopher and Damien and say that the planet's going to be in great shape for them? The first thing we have to do is put a price on pollution. Because right now when someone pollutes, we pay for it and they don't. We have to make sure that the firms themselves pay a price for every carbon emission, every time they do anything that despoils our environment. If they internalize the cost, shocker, they're going to start becoming much more judicious and efficient about it. Then we take those resources and invest in wind and solar and renewable sources of energy and try and take all the fossil fuel subsidies that are way past their sell-by date and then move them over to more sustainable forms of energy. Now, the tough truth in all this is that the United States of America is only 15% of global emissions. So even if we were to get ourselves under control and the other 85% goes up, climate change still continues to get worse. And what's happening in the rest of the world is that China is going to Africa and saying, hey, we've got a power plant for you, it burns coal. And then what does the African government say? Great, we just want energy. So if you wanted to stop emissions from rising, you would need to be at the table with the African government and say, hey, don't take the coal-burning power plant, here are some solar panels, and we're going to subsidize them and make it a no-brainer for you. That is the kind of effort we need to lead as quickly as possible, while acknowledging that we need to invest in making our communities more resilient right now. When there's a natural disaster, who suffers the most? Poor people who don't have strong shelters or cars they can drive away in. So putting money into our hands will lift the least among us, but then we have to invest billions of dollars in making our communities more resilient. It's more expensive to clean up a disaster than it is to build the levees ahead of time. I am the only candidate in the field that is advocating a constitutional amendment so that the government will be tied to preserving our environment through the generations. And I think a lot of the reason why we can't make progress on climate change is that 78% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. Almost half of us can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. So when someone comes to them and says, we need to worry about climate change, what do they say? I can't pay my bills. I'm worried about next month, let alone something that's 5 to 10 years away. And then what's a human reaction if that's the way you feel? It's probably not that big a deal anyway. It's probably going to be okay. And when you talk to many Americans about fighting climate change, unfortunately what they hear is higher prices, greater inconvenience, and fewer jobs. This mindset of scarcity that's tearing us apart is keeping us from making real progress on climate change because so many people have this boot on their throat. So if we put $1,000 a month into their hands and they can look at their kids and say, we're going to be here for a while, and then you come back and say, we need to fight climate change, they're much more likely to say, yes, yes, we do. And then if you integrate environmental sustainability with our economic measurements, you can get rid of this tug of war where people think, oh, it's bad for jobs, it's bad for the economy if you fight climate change. If you had to put a dollar price tag on the impact of climate change, how much would it be? Trillions of dollars. And unfortunately, thousands and thousands of American lives. When you include the cost of not doing anything, you realize that that's the most expensive course of action of all. So what we have again is a measurement problem where if you line up environmental sustainability as a measurement of economic progress, we can see that going green actually is good for the economy because it's going to make us stronger and healthier.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Can we get a big round of applause for our future president and first lady? So we've got some big news because the media is finally paying attention to us. We're about to go live on CNN. So we're going to ask Andrew and Evelyn to head down with Lacey, and we invite you to join him. We're going to have this section right here in the front, and if you'd like to crowd around that section to show the support to the nationwide, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much, everybody.
And then if you stick around, very happy to say hello, take selfies with each and every one of you. Let's end this national media. Tell your friends to turn on CNN because you could be on national TV in just a second.